Hello everyone, it's Gabriel, and I'm here to discuss evaluating uncertainty in your Educational Engineering 217. I'll be your TA today. So we're going to review some of the stuff we talked about in my last video, which was we're trying to maximize our quality of life and the general welfare, depending on how much you balance those two things. And they tie into each other, where you can't be able to serve the general welfare without a good quality of life, and you cannot, and it'll improve your quality of life if you're improving the general welfare. So last time we talked about some of the constraints, which are time, the opportunities are going to constrain you, and I also didn't really discuss those opportunities are going to have varying levels of demand, and those demands may constrain other opportunities you can get. And then I talked about physical capacity. I did not talk about what your mental capacity is. So your mental capacity for learning is not, it's not infinite. You do have a fixed mental capacity where you may not be able to understand certain concepts. Like women are less interested in objects, and men are more interested in objects, and women are more interested in people. So in evaluating one of the constraints on a potential opportunity or choice course of action, your mental capacity is going to vary per person. So didn't really talk about that last time, but it's not too important. Basically, people have different interests, they have different things that they are willing to put their time into, and the mental capacity will vary depending on how much you enjoy what you're learning. So, I don't think we really test our limits very much, but I would say that if you're doing something you're not interested in, your mental capacity kind of drops a fair bit. So today we're going to be talking about discount rates and what that looks like in practice, choice, or what choices might be available to you, and kind of what the paradox is of independence. So I'm going to get rid of all this, and we're going to look at some educational engineering choices people make all the time, and they don't even realize. So, I'll just start with myself. I'll say the first choice you have in your education probably comes at around about age 16. Oh, that is really thin. I did not realize that. Okay. Here we go. Age 16 is choice number 1. For a student. For a parent, you're probably making educational engineering choices the entire time. I guess prior to this you could, say, go to trade school. There are some choices you're making, there are just not very many. So at age 16 though, you have the choice. You can, for most people who are enrolled in public school, so this is your choice. We're going to evaluate different choices through time, okay? So, and then over the span of time, we want to maximize the quality of life. So it's easier to visualize this if we look at time kind of spread out and kind of look at some of the choices. So I guess I'll start before age 16. So we'll say at age, 14, maybe you want to go to trade school. So that'll be the first time. So we're going to have, this is going to be our time axis. So this is going to be years in years, and we're going to start with age 14. We're going to assume you're not a child slave, and you've been educated. Okay, so at age 14, let's say we're going to start in the middle here. Okay, so we have a just normal educated person. We'll call this you. And at age 14, you may have a choice of going to trade school, or traditional education, we'll say. So traditional education would be non-specialized. So one of the choices everyone makes is when they are going to specialize in their education and when they would prefer to just stay open to different possibilities and sample a lot of different things that they could be learning. I'm just going to make sure I got that in the shot. Okay, looks pretty good. So, if you go to trade school, most likely you will then enter an apprenticeship, and then you will then enter a career in that trade. And then you will someday retire. Okay, so trade school is actually a pretty good option that we typically undervalue because there's not much risk of any of these things going wrong as long as you get a good apprenticeship. So like in the history, there was a lot of guilds, and the guilds controlled a lot of trade secrets and labor, and you can research the history of guilds, but basically this is the only uncertain part. So then there's no need to really discount any of these potential other futures. Just basically you would discount it according to how likely you are not to live to those steps, or how likely you are to not want to continue in those career tracks. So I'm just gonna put so we're going to talk about discount rates today. So I'll get rid of this and I'll say, okay, so for every choice you make, the first discount you're going to have to do is mortality. So mortality is the idea that you could die in the future, so that uncertainty is going to make the future less valuable. Also, there's other uncertainties that can come about that we're going to talk about at the end of this video, because they kind of require more in-depth discussion. But basically, any uncertainties about the future require discounts. So I'm just going to put, random uncertainty as well. Random systemic risk, I'll say. And injury is another one. So, for a trade school, you're probably going to have a low risk of injury. Random systemic risk is actually probably going to be less of a factor because there's a shortages of apprenticeships that makes your labor in demand even when systemically there's a reduction in consumption. And mortality is the same for all of them, so you really don't need to discount mortality too much for trade school opportunities unless you're in a trade that increases your mortality, and that's pretty rare. But we're going to talk about that in a second. Hi. Is this room reserved?
It starts at
1:30, okay. So, other options you have are you can Starts at 1:30? Darn. Okay.